Hey guys, welcome back to another SUPboarder video. As you probably guessed in this video, we're going to be talking about the Naish Foil range. We're going to be speaking about the new MA foil they have that sits in their range, and also their new Mast design and their new foil fuselage as well. So a lot of stuff to be covered. And also in SUPboarder Pro, we're going to be speaking about how we got on with changing the back wings up with smaller back wings, with bigger front wings. Maybe not the sort of stuff that Naish recommend, but really our findings. It's been really interesting to use these foils over the last couple months. So definitely check out SUPboarder Pro also if you want to hear a bit more. But let's crack straight into this full review of the Naish foil range for 2022. So where do we start? Well, before we dive into the foils, let's talk about the Mast and the fuselage, which is going to be changing for this year. Now, Naish have done a lot of work on the Mast and the Mast joint that connects to the fuselage, redesigning that whole joint to make it a much stronger, safer joint. It looks completely different to last year's joint. They've come up with an index scarf joint, an ISJ for short. This is basically where the whole joint sits into the fuselage and it's screwed up with two M8 bolts opposed to the original Mast, which was done with three M6 bolts. And also because they have like a type of packer material, which is a different material to if you had an aluminium mast or a carbon mast, when you screw that into the fuselage, it gives you a really good corrosion barrier. So it means you can get your mast out of your fuselage if you haven't taken it out for 6 months and you haven't washed it off with fresh water, which is probably one thing I'm definitely bad at doing, cleaning my foils up after use. So this whole joint is a much more easier, user-friendly joint to use. And it's also way stronger as well. Those two bigger bolts coming from the main fuselage going into the main section of the mast give you a much more secure feel. At the top on the aluminium mast, there's also a lateral bolt that goes through the main plate as well to give you even more security. It is important to note though that if you have got this newer mast, you are going to need a newer fuselage to take this bigger, deeper scarf joint. New fuselage is a much chunkier piece of kit compared to the S26 fuselage, much bigger around the main section. There you've got your two bigger bolt holes, put your M8 bolts straight into the mast. You still have the same existing front foil attachment with the 3 bolts, M6 bolts, and you still have the same back stabilizer attachment with your M6 bolts there, the 2 bolts. But you'll notice with this fuselage, they've given you 3 holes to put your stabilizer wing on. Now this means you can move your wing a little bit further forward or a little bit further back, which means you can have that little bit more control if you want to be jibing or learning to jibe, you're a little bit lower level. Having your stabilizer wing towards the back will give you that bit more control. But if you want to maybe try mixing it up a little bit, maybe pumping a little bit quicker, having a little bit faster on the turns, on the maneuverability, by putting your wing further forward on the front 2 bolts, it's going to give you that slightly livelier feel. Definitely when you see this new fuselage and with the new Mast joint, you can see why Naish have upgraded this, and it's a much more secure system. As far as the constructions of the Mast, you can still get them in aluminium and you can get them in 100% carbon and 35% carbon. The 35% carbon is 35% unidirectional carbon and the 100% carbon is 3K carbon and unidirectional carbon. The big difference there is the weight and the stiffness. The higher carbon content you go, the stiffer the mast is going to feel. So if you're driving into a turn, as soon as you lean into that turn, it's going to go straight down into the foil and start carving. An aluminium mast and a 35% carbon mast will have a slight bit of flex to it. The 35% carbon is stiffer than the aluminium, but they're about the same weight. Compared to the 100% carbon, it's stiffer again and it's lighter again than both those other 2 masts. So really, if you're that performance rider and you really want to be pushing maybe big airs or carving hard, or you're really into maybe downwind, subfoiling, trying to get as much performance out of something, then moving on to a 100% carbon, if you can afford it of course, would be the better option. But for most people getting into the sport, definitely an aluminium mast is absolutely fine, and we still use aluminium masts for 90% of our riding. You will also notice that the carbon masts are a slightly different profile and width compared to the aluminium masts. This is the way that they're made. They can make them a little narrower compared to the aluminium masts, which need to be a certain thickness and size so they give you a good amount of stiffness. Your mast lengths will start at 55 centimeters. They've got 65, 75, 85 and 95 centimeter. And there is actually a 105 centimeter out there as well, but not many of you are going to be looking at that. A lot of you are going to be focusing around the 75 and 85 centimeter. If you're going to be using it in maybe shallow water conditions and maybe flatter water conditions, a 75 centimeter mast is a really good mast to look at. If you're going to be using it in more open sea or choppy waters, definitely moving on to an 85 centimeter mast will give you that bit more height just to ride that foil comfortably in the water, but keep your board out of the chop. With your fuselage length, there's a 55 centimeter and a 64 centimeter. Most of you are probably going to be going on the 64 centimeter, which is going to be fine for your wing foiling, for your subsurf foiling. If you are pushing towards more performance surf foiling, I think probably the 55 would be the one to look at. If you shorten your mast length, it's just going to make your turns a little bit faster, a little bit tighter, makes your pumping a little bit easier, but it does make it harder to jibe and keep yourself up on the foil when you're jibing. So that's why most of you will look at a 64 centimeter to make that a little bit easier. The connection plate is exactly the same as the previous year's Naish foils, and all of the screws are Torx bits, so they're nice and secure and full stainless 316. Okay, so let's move on to the foils now. Now what you're going to find this year is that when you go to a shop, or if you're new to foiling and you're just getting into it, they will be selling them as complete packages still, but also there will be a fair amount of times where you'll see them advertised as front wing, main fuselage and tail wing. But definitely contact the shop and they will supply you with a mast that fits into that. The reason they're doing that is because a lot of you want to change your mast size, but not so much your foil configuration. The three types of foils that they've got in the Naish range this year in lots of different sizes, they've got the jet range, which is an existing sort of foil that's been around a long time. They've got the jet HA, which is this faster, more high aspect ratio jet foil. And this year in 2022, they've got the new Jet MA, which sits in the middle between the two. Now there's lots of different sizes in these foils, and we'll also speak about the tail wings in a minute separately. Let's start off first off with the Jet, the original Jet. Where did this sit and who is it best for, and does it still have a place in the market? This is a very common foil that a lot of people have learnt to foil with and are still learning to foil with now. Good deep profile, nice amount of area to it, good sort of thickness on the front edge, not too much thickness so it doesn't slow it down, but it makes it very nice and easy to use. The more area you have on a foil, the easier it's going to be to ride and fly, the more comfortable it's going to be when you're flying, the less twitchy it's going to be. The downside to having a lot of area on a foil is it's going to be slower than having a thinner base foil, and also having a thinner foil in this measurement here is going to be much quicker, but it's not going to give you as much lift. So the Jet is an all-round design foil to get you up in foiling, to get you carving on waves, to get you doing all types of foil riding, but really give you the easiest entry or the easiest day out on the water, let's say. Not going to give you total top-end performance, but then if you're not wanting that total top-end performance, you will be really thankful for its comfortable and stable nature. They do a good range of sizes, right up to 2,450 for a front wing. The bigger you go, the more stability you're going to have, the earlier you're going to get up in lighter winds. The smaller you go, the faster it's going to be, the better it's going to handle higher speeds, but the more twitchy it's going to be as well. A lot of you, when you're getting into the sport, are definitely looking around the sort of 1650, 2000s. We've still got a jet foil and we still use it for really mastering certain foiling maneuvers. Let's say I want to go out and really crack my jibes, change my feet over, nail my foiling tacks. That's definitely the easiest foil for thinking and working on your technique and not having to worry about how your foil is working under your feet so much. Now moving down from that, we should jump onto the MA, but before I do that, I'm going to skip one and come on to the Jet HA, because this was a foil that was out last year. Many of you have got this and it's very popular with a lot of wing foilers out there. Totally opposite shape to the Jet, much thinner, you can see there, large wingspan to it, but not much depth here. And it's also a lot thinner in the actual thickness as well. It's a much faster foil, it's a much quicker foil to get up, but it's a much more technical foil to use. It's easier to pump and generate speed if you haven't got much with your wing or with the wave. But when it comes to maneuvers and turning from side to side, it's a lot more twitchy than the original Jet. I know a lot of you out there really love this foil because it's a very quick foil for your SUP surf foiling and your wing foiling. Just like the Jet HA has a good range of size. It's not as big as the Jet. If you're looking to pump and keep yourself moving through those slow spots, the Jet HA is the foil you should be looking at. So now let's focus on the Jet MA. It definitely sits in the middle between the two. If you hold the two up side by side, you'll notice that the profile of them is very similar until you come to the wingtips. The wingtips have just been cut off completely with the MA. Now, we were really intrigued to ride this foil and see how this sitted in the Naish offering. Now, we've used this MA in a lot of different conditions with a lot of different sports. Winging on flat water, winging in the waves, SUP surfing, and when you do across a certain amount of disciplines like that, you really get to feel where the foil fits and how it feels under your feet. The MA is a wave riding beast, let's just say that. This foil is so comfortable at turning and riding in waves, and it allows you to get away with so much, whether you're wing foiling in the surf or you're SUP foiling in the surf, or even if you're prone foiling, I guess. This allows you to really bank turns, possibly the same as the Jet HA, but it also allows you to get away with way more than the original Jet HA. It's much more user-friendly than the Jet HA. That must be to do with the wingtips being cut off. The best way to explain it is, if you're using it wing surfing, for instance, and you go to breach and you bring your foil just out of the water, you're not meaning to, but you just breach out of the water, the Jet HA slams you back down way quicker, and you have a much harder time to react to that foil as it comes out of the water. You can't just sort of trim your weight back down or keep yourself going on the wave a little bit more. The MA has a much softer breakout, so it breaks out, but you can regain it, you can pop your foil back in, and you can keep yourself going, or you can keep yourself on that same original wave. So for trying maneuvers and putting yourself in turns and really going for it and just progressing, especially in the waves, the MA has that amazing ability to just let you get away with stuff and to make you surf and foil ride much better than you actually are. It's definitely not a flat water beast compared to the Jet and the Jet HA. It likes to be turned, it likes to be carving and moving around the whole time. It carves up wind pretty well because I think you can get the foil quite far over and the tips don't come out of the water, so you can really bank up wind, but it's not as quick. It's definitely not as quick as the Jet HA. The speed difference and the pickup of the speed is much quicker with the Jet HA. For example, if it was lighter wind and you're out on your wing and you're trying to pump to get going, the Jet HA is going to get you up on that foil earlier. Or if you're paddling in on your SUP surf and you're trying to pop up on the wave earlier, the Jet HA is going to get you up on that wave earlier. And also, when the wave drops off and maybe you want to pump yourself out back again, the Jet HA will be easier to do that. From a winging or surfing point of view, you're going to have to be more powered up with the MA than the other foils. So maybe if you're a larger rider, you're probably not going to get the most out of it unless it's really, really windy. For mid-moderate riders who are a little bit lighter overall, it's not going to be so much of a problem, but you're still going to need more power and more wind and bigger surf to get the most out of it compared to the Jet HA. So the MA is a slower, more boring foil, but it's the foil I would pick every single time for the amount it turns, the ease it comes back on its turns, and the usability it gives me in the surf especially. So I can really see why the MA now is in the Naish range. And I think, to be honest, the Naish range this year is an incredibly complete range of foils. HA, MA and the Jet really deserve to be in the range, and as long as the right rider looks at the right foil, Naish have got something for everybody. Now let's have a quick chat about the tail stabilizers that Naish offer. You get the ones that you get with the bigger Jet range, and you get your ones that you get with the HA range. The bigger jet range is nice because they offer some big rear stabilizers. This one here is a 450, which is one of the biggest stabilizers on the market. An incredible amount of stability. It's going to give you great for cracking those jibes with your wing foiling or giving you as much stability when you're surf riding. You can get the jet range stabilizer down into a 320 size, but not going to be as quick or maneuverable as a smaller tail wing like this. HA stabilizer is available in a 310, a 280, which a lot of you are going to be looking at, and a smaller 220. All the foils are finished off with a high gloss surface, and you can see the carbon weave nicely through that. Also, the yellow pin line around nicely finishes the foil off. Less is definitely more when it comes to the graphics on the foil range for this year. Any negatives or things to be aware of in the Naish range 2022? I think the only thing for me personally is the high gloss finish. As I've just said, it looks fantastic, but it does show up all of the scratches, so you have got to look after your kit a little bit more. I suppose you'd be looking after it the same, but having a matte finish does allow you to get away with not seeing the scrapes a little bit easier. But there are so many advantages to the Naish range for this year. I've seen so many brands go down that high performance foiling route and forget about the core level of beginners, not supplying them with good enough size stabilizer tail wings, not supplying them with nice chunky easy front foils to use. So Naish have got that covered, but at the same time they have got a great range of foils for the more performance driven surfer and winger. The HA is the faster wing, super popular with a lot of wingers out there, but having this new MA, it really does fit so well between these two other foils. Surf riding, getting out and turning loads of calves, that MA foil is a fantastic foil that I'm so glad Naish have brought it into their range for 2022. Big improvements on the masts, the fuselage as well. The joining systems everywhere are working really well, so some really good improvements, and it's so nice to see a complete range of foils from Naish in 2022. If you've got any questions and comments about this Naish range, get them in the comments description below, and definitely check out the SUPboarder Pro video where I'm going to be speaking about using different tail wings and giving you an idea of where you could be changing down to get yourself on different foils, but making sure you have the easiest progression as you get into whatever discipline you're foiling. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on another SUPboarder video real soon.